Good morning, everyone joining us. I have the pleasure today to introduce Michael Pilaeten for one of the interesting products that we have on ISTQB, the newly launched Agile Tester. Michael Pilaeten is the chair of the Advanced Working Group and also the product owner of Agile Tester. I'm sorry a bit to start this session a few minutes late. We had live demo syndrome, but the technical issues are now resolved. So I'll hand over to you, Michael. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Lovelace. Thank you for the nice introduction, and welcome everybody to this live webinar dedicated to the brand new Certified Tester Advanced Level Agile Tester. What I would like to share with you is a few slides, a short presentation to explain to you why we have revamped so thoroughly the Agile Tester, because it's a very successful product, and touching a very successful product is always quite hard. Now, if you take a look at the history, the evolution or even the revolution that Agile has caused in our industry, it's quite intense. Agile dates back as an evolution of waterfall. The waterfall model was coined in 1970, where everything followed a sequential path. We first had analysis, we had the requirements, we had an architecture, we went to design, we went to development, and then we had testing. Because everybody knows the problems that you can have with waterfall, late verification, no testing first, very poor customer interaction. In 91, Scrum was coined. 91, I assume that most of you were not born yet. I wasn't working yet. That's a very, very long time ago. Then in 2001, 10 years later, the greatest minds of the IT industry came together in a ski resort in Utah and discussed what the best approach would be to release software. And they came up with the Agile Manifesto with the main principles, with the cornerstones, and so on. In 2006, then the adoption of the more different variants became, with Lean, with Kanban, with different ways of doing things. In 2011, Agile was becoming more and more mainstream, and then we had the scaling models. We had SAFe in 2011, we had LESS, we had Nexus, we had all different models, because we understood that doing something only in your team was not possible anymore. Then in 2016, DevOps was there. That was the big breakthrough where developers and ops started talking to each other, and agility was not enough anymore. There was also the technical layer and the communication added on top of it. Now, DevOps was already coined in 2009, but it took quite some years to get full traction. And then in 2020, right into the pandemic, people realized, you know what, all that working together is fine, but we need to go to a different thing, which was already there in the beginning of Scrum and the Agile Manifesto, meaning value is important, but in 2020, value stream mapping, value-centric behavior became the cornerstone of Agile. So there has been quite an evolution or even a revolution in the software industry, and especially thanks to Agile. Now, ISTQB is a global standard when it comes down to software testing. It's a qualification. And also ISTQB has undergone some changes in adopting Agile in its practices. In 2014, ISTQB released what was then called the Certified Tester Foundation Level and Agile Extension. So it was not considered a full syllabus. It was rather an extension to the foundation level for those people, for those professionals working in an Agile environment, when Agile was still quite new. A few years later, 4 years later, ISTQB released on an advanced level the Agile Technical Tester, because it apparently was clear that for doing Agile thoroughly, you need to have a lot of technical insights. Not on a base layer, because communication, collaboration is key, but in order to fine-tune your regression testing, your performance, and so on, you need those technical aspects. So it was there that ISTQB started adopting things like ATDD, BDD, test-first approaches. That was in the Agile Technical Tester on an advanced level. In 2019, we updated that syllabus with some small remarks that came from the industry. And in 2020, right after the pandemic, we released Agile Test Leadership at Scale. As I showed you on the previous slide, we had the emerge of all these big scaling models. And this syllabus is created to give response to that, how to do Agile test leadership and also scaling up. That underwent 1 year later a big overhaul. Version 2 was released. And then at the same year, ISTQB released CTFL, the foundation level, so the cornerstone 4.0. This was a major change. ISTQB certified tester foundation level 2, 3, 3.1, 3.11 were always SDLC agnostic. It didn't really matter whether you were working in waterfall, V model, W model, Agile, Scrum, XP, Kanban. The principle generally applied. But for the 4.0 CTFL, we realized that Agile became a certain standard, a normal way of working, much more than waterfall or V model. So we revamped CTFL 4.0 and embraced a lot of the concepts. So a lot of the content that was coming from the original Agile extension from 2014 was being re-evaluated, also updated, of course, and then put in CTFL 4.0. What raised the question, what are we going to do with that Agile tester? So we sat together with a group of authors, with a group of thought leaders, and realized, you know what, there is still a lot of good knowledge in the Agile extension, knowledge that was not yet absorbed by CTFL 4.0. But there's also a lot of good new practices, because 2014 is a very, very long time ago, and the industry has evolved. In 2014, there was no GenAI. In 2014, there were less possibilities for doing test automation. In 2014, nobody heard about, or rarely anybody learned about Zoom or Miro or Mural or any kind of collaboration platforms. So we took everything from the Agile extension, which was still valuable. We checked for new topics on the subject, and then we came together with the authors and start writing the syllabus, which we're discussing right now, the Certified Tester Advanced Level Agile Tester 2.0. Now, when I told you a couple of minutes ago that Agile has become the de facto standard of developing software, that is not my feeling, that is not my impression, it's not my gut feeling. That is what statistics says. This is data from the State of Agile report. There you see the claim that 75% of all respondents say that if they develop software, 75% of them uses any kind of form of Agile. That can be pure Agile, that can be Water Scrum or Vagile or Wagile, where you do your typical Agile stuff and then something more sequential at the end, but they use Agile principles. 35% is working in what they call the pure Agile. So the clean cut iterations, the velocity, the story points, all the ceremonies, the Scrum Master, the team coach, the collaboration, the communication, the community planning, the collaborative user story writing. That is what 35% are doing. And just 25% of all IT projects is in non-Agile. There we see from the respondents that these people are typically government-based, high-risk based, where velocity and especially flow is not a key. Their customers, their stakeholders, are not wanting continuous updates, they want stability. And if Agile can do something, it's about being very flexible. If you don't require flexibility, then you take away the main reason to become Agile. So it's clear 75% are doing something in Agile. Now, I'm speaking here with my testing fellows, with an audience of testers, and of course you realize, well, 75% plus 35% plus 25% equals much more than 100%. And you're absolutely right. But nobody said that in any kind of questionnaires, they're not possible. It's not possible to answer to multiple questions or to check multiple checkboxes. So certain people check multiple ones, but at least the relevance of these numbers is there. So as I said, we sat together with a bunch of people, authors, relevant thought leaders in the industry, and we decided, okay, 2014 has been a long, long time. What is now relevant in nowadays business? What are the business outcomes that a new syllabus should adhere to? Well, the first business outcome was that if you work in an Agile testing environment, you should be able to collaborate in cross-functional teams. Teams composed of different profiles. But while doing that you should be familiar with the basic principles and the practices of Agile software development. A second business outcome is that you should be able to adapt your existing testing experience and knowledge to those Agile values and principles. That means a thought change. That means rethinking about how you work. That you should be able to create and especially to implement various Agile software development test approaches. Because the way you handle testing in an Agile project or an Agile setting might be different than when you work in a sequential model. That you should be able to apply the relevant Agile software development approaches, and more specifically, the test techniques relevant in Agile, to make sure that the test cases you are creating provide adequate coverage. Unlike more traditional, more sequential models, where coverage is the key, in Agile it's about trust and collaboration and communication. But still, we need to be able to show to our stakeholders that we use the right techniques and that we have tested the right things. So it's about finding that balance between full coverage and adequate coverage, which is enough to cover the risks, to mitigate the risk, and to make our stakeholders happy and that they trust our solution. Another outcome, and it might be a little bit off, is that we want to assist the business stakeholders, the proxies, the POs, in making sure they can define understandable and testable requirements, user stories and scenarios, and that they can derive acceptance criteria. Because typically this is where the first cracks appear in software development: incorrect, incomplete, and inconsistent requirements. So our goal as tester is not to take away the requirement writing from them, but it's working with them to clarify those requirements. Will that be by backlog grooming or by backlog refinement or by collaborative user story writing? All fine, but the end result should be that your requirements are as clear, understandable, and testable as possible. Of course, no Agile without automation, so we should support and contribute to any form of test automation in Agile. We should also work and share information with our other team members, the developers, using as effective communication styles and channels as possible. And then finally, we should be able to support the Agile team in test planning, so that it's not only when we talk about planning in an Agile team about how much time will it take to develop certain user stories or PBIs, but it's also taking into account all the additional work: documentation, the verification, the validation, the automation, the non-functionals, so that the team gets acquainted with it. Based on these business outcomes, we started drafting a syllabus. And then we talk, of course, about the content. What is in the new syllabus? Well, the first chapter is about the test strategy and the test approach, because before you can dive into the details, you need to think about what are we going to test, how are we going to test, and why are we testing things. This chapter starts with something which is, if you take a look at it from a certification point of view, not examinable. So if you do the new CTAL-AT exam, this is not coming to your exam, but we wanted to provide people where their Agile knowledge might be a little bit rusty or dusted. We want to give them some overview. So we are repeating the Agile manifesto, the core principles, and so on. We talk about the distinction between different test types. You all know test types, the non-functional ones, the functional ones. But we also discussed in which situation these test types are better tested during the iteration, so taking into account your velocity, but also after the iteration, because certain test types are better tested afterwards. Doesn't mean you're not working purely Agile, but they exist because of a lot of different reasons. We'd also talk about the value of end-to-end testing in Agile. In Agile, your testing is typically focused on your iteration content, but typically you also want to validate or to verify complete business flow, complete end-to-end flow. So how are you going to tackle that in an Agile fashion? Based on the book by Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin about the holistic testing, we distinguished the different schools of testing in Agile. So we are going to differentiate for more formal types of testing compared to the more holistic types of testing, so that you are allowed to define your own test strategy and test approach for your agile testing. And finally, because we have a lot of iterations which are coming in a very fast cadence, regression is of the utmost importance. So we're discussing different test approaches that you can apply in your testing in Agile. That is your first chapter. The second chapter is not so much on the coordination level or managerial level, is rather on a people level. So it's called people and teams. We'll discuss there the whole team approach. Well, the whole team approach was already there and is already explained to a certain extent in the CTFL, the foundation level, but we extend it here. So how can we as a team collaborate in creating valuable software sooner? We talk about the difference, and this is purely people-based, about generalization and specialization. Because we discuss and we work as a whole team, everybody should be able to assist in other tasks. This is typically generalization. But for certain activities, you also need specialization. If you're going to dive into some very old legacy code, you do not want to have this done by a generalist. You want to have it done by a specialist. So how do you find the right balance in your team between having a lot of generalizing profiles compared to having a number of specialization profiles in your team? That is what this topic is about. We also talk about increasing your collaboration with your business responsibles, with your product owners, with your stakeholders. How can they assist in delivering better value? How can you assist them in making their life more efficient and more effective? And not only with the POs, but also with the developers. How can I, being a testing profile, help the developers? Can I do some backlog grooming? Can I start writing some base code? If I find a defect, can I do some debugging and already highlight where in the code it might go wrong? Can I assist in unit testing? So typically, how can we as tester help our developers? And then finally, the concept of tissue testers, coming from the entertainment industry, from the gaming industry. So typically hallway testers use only once, which is very typical for fast-paced agile development. How you can use these, what are the benefits, and what are the downsides? The third chapter is about test management. So managing once the tests are ongoing, and then test process improvement, how we can continuously evolve and improve our testing. We recapture the 4 testing quadrants, but we extend it with new content. We talk about test planning in Agile, not only planning on a global level, but specifically test planning on a product level, on an iteration level. So what kind of activities are you doing there? We talk about the different types of reporting, because of course, when you work in an Agile team, whatever happens in your Agile team, everybody should be aware because of your daily stand-ups and your dashboards, but you also have different stakeholders who do not necessarily need the same type of information. So what types of reporting can you do? And if you do reporting, what kind of coverage, test coverage, can you present to them and do they require? Are we talking to developers about code coverage? Are we talking to your business about risk coverage or requirement coverage? Are you talking to your lead tester or your test manager about test coverage? So how can you work with that in an agile fashion? Based on that coverage, we talk about the different KPIs or metrics that you can adhere to in Agile, and also about the different initiatives you can launch for embedding test process improvement in your iteration. So best practice in retrospectives, best practices in spiking, best practicing in demoing, that is what is discussed here. Chapter 4 is shift left. While chapter 1, 2, and 3 were rather on the background, theoretical side, more managerial, chapter 4 and the next ones becoming much more hands-on. Shift left, meaning shifting your testing more to the initiation of testing before development. So we're talking here about the concepts of BDD, ATDD, acceptance driven development and specification by example, and DevOps. We talk about the concepts of storyboarding, which is typically also done in an agile fashion, but also test boarding. How can you use test boarding to come up with more thorough test cases? We use example mapping to further explain requirements. We talk about the different biases because more is communicated, but less can be documented. It might be that some unaware biases are appearing in your requirements or in your behavior. So there are a few things to consider when developing agile software. There's a topic about user story slicing, about when a story is big enough, too big, when you need to slice, and different slicing techniques. Again, going back to chapter 2, how a tester can help POs in writing better user stories. And then finally, we have some approaches in requirements engineering, how these things coming from requirements engineering can help us in Agile to come up with better requirements, user stories, epics, vision, features, and acceptance criteria. Chapter 5, which is the most thorough one, the more buffer one, the heavier one, is about Agile approaches and test techniques in Agile. This is also the most hands-on one. So this one I'm looking forward as a trainer to teach and to share with you. So this is about practicing test heuristics. This is about using test mnemonics, the few hiccups, the San Francisco Depot, and so on. So acronyms that can help you to think, to visualize, and to assist your testing. It's about using test tours to better browse through your software. It's about using and improving your test charters to come up with better ideas to improve, to extend your current exploratory testing practices. It's about using mob testing. It's about using pair testing. It's even about using vibe testing, which is AI-driven or AI-assisted testing. And it's the concept of test smells. How do you know, or how can you suggest that your test cases might not be up to par and need some adaptation, need some changes to become better? And then the final chapter is about test automation and test tools, where we talk about the test automation pyramid, but much more in depth than we tackled it before. And we talked about different test automation approaches that you can adhere to in Agile. We talk about different test first approaches, STAT, BDD, ATDD, SBE, DevOps. We talk about the different test automation strategies that you can have in Agile and the different types of test toolings beyond automation that you can have in Agile. Those are the 6 chapters that the syllabus is comprised of. That's quite a lot of information, as that especially chapter 4, 5, and 6 are very hands-on. It's as practical as we can make it in a certification syllabus. But I truly believe that this syllabus represents the current practices of anyone performing test activities in an Agile team. That's the syllabus we created. Now, of course, we are volunteers for the ISTQB, and ISTQB is about certification as well. So, of course, there is an exam for those who want it. The new exam, so the Advanced Level Agile Tester 2.0 exam, just like most ISTQB exam, is comprised of 40 different questions, is a multiple choice exam, where the maximum score is 52 points. That's if you score 100%, you score 52 out of 52. The passing score to pass the exam is 34 points, which is sufficient. The exam length itself is 90 minutes, but if you take your exam in a language which is not your native language, so for me, my native language is Dutch. If I take the exam in English, I get 25% additional times because I might lose some time due to language issues. And of course, it's ISTQB. Sample exams are available on the website. We have the sample exam in English on the ISTQB website. And a lot of our member boards are translating the sample exam, the syllabus, the glossary, to have it in your own language. So if you're looking for an exam in a specific language, reach out to your local board for that localization. Since the launch, I think it's a week and a half ago, of the Agile Tester, my mailbox was flooded with questions. I tried to summarize some of them for you. I know that you might still have some questions afterwards. So if you have questions already, put them in the chat and we try to tackle them after this webinar live. but I already highlighted some of the questions that keep on getting back in my mailbox. So some frequently asked questions that I wanted to share with you. The first one is, who is this new syllabus, the advanced level Agile tester, designed for? What is the audience of this syllabus? Well, it is for everybody working, doing some testing in any kind of Agile environment. So that means if you're a tester, a test analyst, a test engineer, a test manager, a UAT tester, if you're a developer, but you also do something with quality, if you're a product owner, a scrum master, a quality manager, an analyst, a technology lead, this syllabus is designed for you. So in summary, it's for anybody who can contribute to quality in an Agile team and that wants to deepen the experience that they currently are having. That is the target audience of the Agile tester. Now, this happens a lot. Is the new Agile tester simply an updated or an update of the foundation level Agile tester? Well, the short answer there is no. But of course, I want to explain a bit more. In Agile tester, we included much more higher cognitive expectations. The old Agile tester had a lot of what we call in ISTQB K1, K2, K3 knowledge levels. K1 is learning by heart, K2 is understanding, K3 is practicing. In the Agile tester, on the advanced level that we just released, we also have included K4 knowledge levels, which is a higher cognitive expectations. So there you need to be able to analyze a given situation and explain what you would do if you would be faced with that kind of situation. We added a lot of new advanced topics, which we can't really include in a foundation level syllabus. And the focus is also not only because it's a lot of hands-on, but the focus is to a certain extent also more on leadership, on strategy, on approach, and on continuous improvement. Therefore, no, this is not just an update of the old Agile tester. This is a complete rehaul, a revamp with a lot of new topics. What happened to certain topics like the test pyramid, the different quadrants, retrospective, because these topics were already in the old Agile tester? Well, these are considered as assumed knowledge, so we're not going to tackle those again in the Agile Tester 2.0, or they are covered in the CTFL, the Certified Tester Foundation Level 4.0. However, as I explained to you, we start the syllabus with a new introduction chapter, and we keep on reiterating about the quadrants and the pyramid, but these are not considered examinable for the advanced level. When we're talking, for example, about the 4 testing quadrants, we are talking about how to apply them in a test strategy, not just explaining what is quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. That is considered foundation level or assumed knowledge. Also a question that pops in my mailbox. So I'm currently holding a certified tester, Agile tester certificate. I followed the training, I took the exam, I have a certificate. It's in the syllabus. Will I lose my certification? Well, the answer there is no. As always, ISTQB certificates remains valid lifelong. So don't be afraid. But however, if you are active in an Agile team, it is highly recommended to recertify. Your Agile tester certificate that you currently have is based on materials from 2014. If you want to be relevant in today's business and you want to show your certificate to your employer or to a candidate or to whatever, and it's based on outdated knowledge, it might not give the best impression. So yes, it remains valid, but my strong advice towards you is that if you can, try to recertify that you're at least on top of the more leading edge topics in the Agile industry. If I currently have an Agile Tester certificate, so an Agile Tester 1.0, will I be automatically upgraded to advanced level Agile Tester? There the answer is quite strict, it's no. So we are not going to grandfather the current Agile Tester in the new one. So if you want to have the certified tester advanced level Agile Tester, you need to go for the new qualification. Why? As said, it's a completely different syllabus with much more advanced topics, new topics on a higher cognitive level. So it reflects a certain difference in scope and difficulty. So yes, you can have both. You can have the certified tester, agile tester, and you can go for the certified tester, advanced level agile tester, and have these next to each other. That is possible, but we're not going to automatically upgrade you to the new one. Michael, I have planned some existing agile tester training. I have planned my exam. Will that mean it's not available anymore? Of course, ISTQB has created a sunset period. That means that your current 1.0 training and exams remains valid for 12 more months. So mid-May 27, then the training will not be relevant anymore or valid anymore, and you cannot take the 1.0 exam anymore. For everything which is localized, it's 18 months. So that will be November 27, then the Agile Tester 1.0 is completely off the market. It's completely and fully retired. Can I still take my Agile tester during that sunset period? So during those 12 months or 18 months? Of course you can. So you can choose whatever kind of version of the Agile tester you're taking. You can still find the syllabus, the glossary, the sample exam on the website, both for CTAL-AT version 1.0 and advanced level Agile tester version 2.0. Both downloads are available. You can follow accredited trainings, you can take the exams, but after the deadline, only the advanced level will remain available. Is your Agile tester on the advanced level more difficult than the previous one? And there I have to be very honest with you, yes, this is more difficult. Just talking about syllabus size, it's 20 pages more. When we talk about depth of syllabus, it's much more advanced level. So we try to assess some higher level skills in the syllabus. So I give you some examples here. There's a topic about analyzing user stories to create test charters, typically in exploratory testing. There is selecting the right process improvement based on the metrics being given. So you will be given certain metrics coming out of an Agile project, and which kind of process improvements would you like to undertake? It's about having the test quadrants. What kind of test strategy would you like to adhere to given a certain situation, given a certain product or team? So this is a much more cognitive, dense syllabus that we're facing here. So those expectations, this goes beyond foundation level. Foundation levels rather on understanding concepts. This is really about applying things, understanding, and taking decisions. Those were the questions I was getting in my mailbox. I think I tackled most of them, but I'm quite certain you might have some different questions. So first of all, I would like to thank you for your presence here and for your collaboration here. And I'm fully open to all the questions and remarks you might be having.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. A lot of FAQ, lot of FAQ rather, lot of FAQ questions that you already taken. I'm not sure if we have other questions from the audience. Nevertheless, I would like to remind our audience about the sunset dates. So if you're planning to take the exams for the version 1.0 in English, you have till the 6th of May 2027 to do so. If it is in non-English, that would be 6th of November 2027. So those will be the sunset date. But if you're planning to do it like to start afresh, it's better to go for the new one, 2.0. And we saw as well, it's an increase in chapters from 3 to 6. And in 2020, you mentioned, Michael, that Agile had a recent had a refocus on the value centric, so that also shows the evolution of our syllabus, of our certification with respect to the market demand. All right, I saw one question that was popping up. Yes, should I still do the certification? I'm already CTFL certified. So you did mention, Michael, that there is an overlap. There was an overlap with the previous version of foundation level and the Agile Tester version 1.0. So should someone from the testing community still be considering the new certification if the person is already foundation level certified?
It's a great question, and I'm lucky to have it because I'm proud to have been part of the foundation level 4.0 and its development. So when we started drafting foundation level 4.0, and I'm talking only about that level of CTFL, we introduced a lot of agile concepts. So we introduced some test first approaches, the testing quadrants, the test pyramids. We talked about the manifesto, the agile principles, all of that. So there is a lot of good agile knowledge, a lot of good agile terminology in the foundation level syllabus. So if you are not really practicing agile and you're just doing it as a refresher, you can get a lot of value out of CTFL 4.0 when it comes down to agile practices. However, if you're actively testing in an agile project or you're going to be involved in an agile project as a tester or as a developer or a PO doing certain testing tasks, then the hands-on knowledge from strategy to management to preparation to execution to reporting, that is in the new advanced level. So it really depends on what you want to get out of things. Foundation still remains the cornerstone and is the prerequisite also for this syllabus. But if you want to get more into depth and really learn how to do things, then I highly recommend the Agile Tester Advanced level.
Perfect. All right, another interesting question. Where can I find material related to the syllabus?
Is it one for you or one for me, Lovesh?
I'll let you answer it.
Well, of course, you can find all the materials on the ISTQB website, so which is istqb.org. And then if you go to our portfolio, you select on the advanced level the Agile Tester, you come to a dedicated page on that. If you scroll down, you find out the audience, you get a block diagram, you get the glossary, you get the sample exams, exam structure and rule. We have a glossary there and all the explanations. That is for the English version. As I explained in my talk, if you want to go for the localized version, I'm looking at Lovelace for the French version, for example, to the German, the Finnish, whatever kind of version you can think of, you go to the website of your local ISTQB board and you download the localized version there.
Understood. All right, just to add to your answer, Michael. So we have the syllabus, we have a sample question, sample questionnaire, sample question paper over there, and also the answer. So you could do it through self-study. You could go through the syllabus, study it, and then attempt the sample, correct it, get the correct justification as well for each answer, and then go for the exam. Right. Right. Do we have any other question? Let me check. Nope. I think that was it. As a reminder, we'll also have a live session at 4 p.m. CEST today for those who would like to join again and maybe come up with new questions. Michael will be with us again. And also a reminder that we are having a dedicated stream on the A4Q Testing Summit for ISTQB, where this product will be again showcased and discussed. So that's also another opportunity for our audience to join and ask questions over there. All right. Any last word, Michael?
Thank you for having me on stage here, and especially thank you for the audience. Depending on where you are in the world, good morning or good afternoon. And then, of course, I really hope to see you again in one of the courses from ISTQB, on one of the conferences. And if you have experience with the new Agile syllabus, if you have comments, if you have feedback, just reach out by any means possible, and I'm glad to assist you with your endeavors in Agile.
Thank you, Michael. So I'll see you in the live session in the afternoon at 4 p.m. CEST and see the audience again over there. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your time. And thank you to our audience. Have a good day to everyone.